To me, that's what a closet is when you're not being fully authentically yourself because you were afraid of the repercussions or judgment that it would have if you were. To me, that's a closet.
Welcome to Season of Stuck, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the all too human experience of feeling stuck. I'm your host, Deanna, and on this podcast, we explore all things stuck. How and why stuckness happens, what it feels like, how to learn and grow from it, and ultimately, how to get unstuck and move forward in an authentic, empowered way. If you are looking for insights, support, and community as you make your journey from stuck to unstuck, you're in the right place. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Season of Stuck. I am your host, Deanna. If this is your first time listening, welcome. And if this isn't your first time listening, welcome back. My hope is that while you're here, you will find something that resonates, whether that's a story or an insight or a fact or a glimmer of truth that helps you feel just a little less alone in your stuckness and just a little closer to getting unstuck. And if you feel that this podcast supports you in taking even a single step on your journey from stuck to unstuck, then I've done my job. And thank you for letting me be a part of that journey. So today we are talking about closets, and more specifically, coming out of them. Now, the term coming out of the closet is most commonly associated with sexual identity. And that is definitely a closet where a lot of people can feel stuck, myself included. I have pretty much always known that I am not straight, but I kept that part of myself hidden for the majority of my life. It wasn't until really recently, like maybe 3 years ago, that I, to use the framework of this episode, came out of the closet and started owning my sexual identity, which I'm still kind of figuring out to this day. Maybe bi, maybe pan. I haven't really settled on a word that fully feels right, but I'm not trying to hide anymore. And that has allowed me to live more authentically and feel less stuck in the process. Obviously, coming out of the closet as it relates to sexuality is a huge deal. But hiding our sexual identity isn't the only closet we can find ourselves in. A closet is really any metaphorical space where we keep parts of ourselves hidden and tucked away. Maybe because they feel scary, or because we're worried we'll be judged, or because it doesn't feel safe to share those parts with the world. For example, maybe in your heart of hearts, you dream about ditching your successful corporate job to put your time and energy towards your love for writing or cooking or roller skating or whatever it is that you're passionate about. But you don't share that dream with anyone because you're worried they'll think you're crazy for walking away from a stable career. Or maybe you act a certain way around other people because you want to fit in and fulfill their expectations of you. But that mask isn't actually an accurate representation of who you are. And the real you is someone completely different. Or maybe you're falling in love with someone and are afraid to tell them because you're afraid they may not love you back. It doesn't matter what the details are. When you're in the closet, whatever your closet may be, you're not able to be fully authentic. And that is the definition of stuck. I have found myself in many closets over the course of my life, with my sexuality, with my addiction, my mental health issues, trying to fit the mold of what I believe other people want me to be, often at the expense of who I want to be. And every time I find myself in that space, I feel stuck and unable to move forward into the next version of myself in my life. It's only in coming out of those closets that I've been able to get unstuck and build a life that feels right. Definitely not perfect, but right. And not only has coming out of my closets helped me to live more authentically, but it's also helped me connect more deeply with other people. The more I tiptoed my way out of the closets and shared more of my truth, the more I felt like people could really see me, and the closer I felt to them as a result. Not only that, but living the experience of both being in and coming out of the closet helped me cultivate more empathy and understanding for people experiencing their own closet related challenges. And again, that empathy made me feel more connected to other people. I wanted to learn more about what it means to be in the closet and how coming out of our closets can help us get unstuck. And that is what brought me to today's guest. Ash Beckham is an inclusivity expert, advocate, educator, wife, mother, and speaker who frequently addresses topics related to inclusivity and inclusive leadership. Known for her inspiring viral TEDx talk, Coming Out of Your Closet, which highlights coming out of the closet as a universal human experience, Ash also frequently speaks on how to live a more authentic life and how tapping into empathy for others can also be a path for empowering yourself. During our conversation, Ash explores what it actually means to be in the closet and why it's such a universal human experience, and how that experience can keep us feeling stuck. We also chat about the importance of sharing our stories to foster more connection and empathy, and how to, when you feel safe and ready, approach hard coming out conversations, own your truth, and get unstuck in the process. Now, before we jump into the conversation, I just want to highlight that I recognize that my ability to come out of the many closets that I found myself in is 100% a privilege. Was I scared to share certain parts of myself or afraid that people would judge me? Yes. Did I fear for my safety or worry that the people that I love would abandon or disown me if I shared those parts of myself? No. And I know that that is the reality for many people in many closets. So I just want to recognize that privilege and say that if there is a closet you don't feel comfortable or safe to come out of, that you should never feel pressured to do so. Coming out of the closet, whatever that closet may be, is an extremely personal experience and should only be done in your way and on your time. Okay, that being said, let's jump into my conversation with Ash. Ash, welcome to Season of Stuck. Thank you so much for being here.
Deanna, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I recently watched your TED Talk and it just hit me with all the feels, directly pierced my heart, and shifted my perspective and opened the way that I view this idea of coming out of the closet. So I'm really excited to explore the inspiration for that and what that means and how we can all incorporate that into our lives.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you.
I guess to kick things off, I would love if you could introduce yourself to listeners and tell us about your story and what inspired your work in terms of helping people understand what it means to be in the closet and how to come out and live more authentically.
Yeah, absolutely. So about 10 years ago, I was just living my life in Boulder, Colorado, which is a pretty progressive place, and thought that just my existence was kind of enough. And then I had friends of mine, I didn't have kids of my own at the time, but I had friends of mine that had kids, and I was seeing them in high school or in middle school, and they would come back after having conversations at school, or people would, use gay in a pejorative way. And I could see this kind of this challenge for them of how to really land in that space. Did they need to identify as allies? Like, what kind of pressure was that? Why were people saying these things? Like, the middle school hallways are still middle school hallways, right? Like, we can be evolved as we want, but sometimes that's a tough place to be. And again, right, we live in this progressive place, and it was never out of malintent. It was almost just like a misunderstanding. So I started to have those conversations, and I did a Ignite talk, which is you go for 5 minutes and the slides auto advance every 15 seconds, which is great. Their tagline is enlighten us, but make it quick. And so I did, that was like my first talk, and it's like an amateur speaking event. And the first time I went, I wasn't participating. I was just in the audience. There was a guy that talked about his ups and downs with weight loss. And it was just, he was so raw and authentic and real and funny. And men never talk about it. People in Boulder don't really talk about it. Like, it was just this really unique perspective of just talking about life in front of a bunch of people and making them laugh. And I was like, I want to do that. So a couple months later, they had the people could submit applications, and I did, and I got picked, and that got some traction online. And that kind of led to the next version was a TED talk. And then I was kind of like off and on my way. So in the beginning, I say I was an accidental advocate because I didn't ever expect, like, that wasn't my trajectory that I was shooting for, right? It just was kind of feeling like I had this voice and this ability to communicate these concepts in a way that I hadn't seen communicated before, that helped people kind of understand our similarities rather than our differences. And that seemed to land. And then a new career path was launched for me at that point.
How amazing. I love that title, Accidental Advocate.
Yeah, you just don't know, right? Like, you don't, but then what are you going to do? You sit there and you're in this space, and weeks after some of these talks, I'm getting these calls to go to conferences and be the keynote speaker. And I wasn't really ready for that, but and it's a supportive network here that's like, well, what are you going to say? No, like, you know how long this is going to last, and it's changing the way people are thinking, and it's making a difference. Like, how can you say no to that? How can you not just figure it out? So for the beginning, I would do like, oh, shucks, kind of, that perspective. But then all of a sudden, people actually expect you to be an expert. And I mean, it's like the only thing any of us are experts in are being us, right? So it's when it's your stories that you're sharing, like, I can't tell you LGBTQ people, like, nobody's a monolith, but at the same time, I can tell you what my story was like. And if that maybe changes the way you see things, then I feel like that's a win.
And you touched on two such important things. One in which sometimes the key to finding forward momentum and finding our purpose, I think there's this idea that like it's a puzzle that we have to figure out and we need to sit down and really draft out and brainstorm and what am I here to do? But oftentimes, the way that we find our purpose and our meaning and what we're here to do is by following those curiosities and, oh, that sounds interesting. And, oh, I admire that in another person, like you had when you were hearing that person speak. And then just kind of following the breadcrumbs. And then all of a sudden, it leads you in the direction that you're supposed to go. And all of a sudden, you have like a completely different life.
Yeah, and that's such a great perspective. You have to be open to it. You have to be willing to go on that journey that you're talking about. You have to be open to that curiosity. And I feel like so many times we shut that out, or we don't have time for it, or whatever, but to give yourself those moments where you can just kind of that curiosity go and just see where it leads you is changes so many things. So
Mm-hmm. It is the key to living like an adventurous, creative life. And yeah, just giving yourself the permission to kind of figure it out as you go is such a powerful tool, not only for getting unstuck, but just for living your most authentic life. And then the other thing that you touched on, which I think is just so beautiful and so important for everyone to hear, is that our greatest power is in being exactly who we are and sharing that with the world. Like every single person has a very unique and specific set of skills and life experiences and talents and gifts that they bring to the table. And if you can leverage those things and find a way to share that with the world, I feel like that's where real change, that's where real momentum, and that's where we can really make an impact. So it's incredible that that's literally what you're living right now.
yeah, and I think so much of that is like, it is really hard. I've spoken in front of a lot of groups of people, and there's a rawness to some of the personal stories and experiences that I've had. And I'm rarely the hero. Usually I'm the goat in a lot of those stories. But I think it's, I have people that have maybe not agreed with everything I've said. But when you have somebody come up and just tell you what it's like to be them, it's really hard to not listen to that person, right? It is not hard. That's to me what breaks the wall between the us and the them, right? Them is the group of people that we aren't associated with, that we don't have commonality with, that we don't see. And I mean, when I first came out to my parents, and one of their concerns, well, what do we tell our friends? What are our friends going to think? And my response was like, I don't want them to think differently of me because I'm gay. I'm the same person they've known for 20 years. I want them to think differently about gay people because now they know one, right? And that kind of blending of those, of all of a sudden it's a we or a one of us, then all of a sudden, when you hear things that are anti whatever group you're talking about, it hits a little bit differently because you know somebody it happened to, right? When all of a sudden I ran into people at my sister's wedding who realized I couldn't do the same thing that Mandy was doing because I was gay, because it was before marriage equality. all of a sudden that lands a little bit differently. Well, wait, that doesn't make any sense, right? The nonsensicalness of it comes to head when you know somebody it's directly affecting.
It fosters a more personal connection because when you're thinking of something in terms of an ideology or a concept, it can be hard to feel that connection. But like you said, when it's a person that you know, that you love, that you understand, then it feels more personal and a little bit easier to connect to.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about being in the closet. So this podcast is a podcast about feeling stuck. And I don't know that there's many things that can contribute to feelings of stuckness than being literally stuck in a closet, whether that is in terms of your sexuality or addiction or certain belief systems. And I think that we often think of being in the closet in terms of sexuality, but your perspective really widens that definition. So I would love if you could expand on what being in the closet actually means and how we keep ourselves hidden in those closets.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the one thing to me, which was kind of the common thread throughout that talk, is that we can relate on these somatic feelings, right? If you have ever been in like, does everybody know what it's like to tell someone that they're LGBTQ, right? To identify with a non-traditional or an alternate sexuality than everybody expects, right? That no, not everybody knows what that's like. But have you ever been in a position where you had to tell somebody something they didn't know about you that you thought might change how they treated you or what they thought of you? Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's done that, right? Like, that's telling your parents you got a bad grade on a test. That's telling somebody you cheated on them. That's telling somebody you're sick. I mean, we all have a time in our life where we've had to be like, oh, is this going to change everything in this interpersonal dynamic? And if we can relate on that piece, the details of it become much less significant. So to me, that's what a closet is when you're not being fully authentically yourself because you were afraid of the repercussions or judgment that it would have if you were. To me, that's a closet.
And what do you think it is that keeps people stuck in that closet? I hear a lot of fear of repercussion, fear of judgment, fear of not being accepted for who you are. So, what is like the emotions and what is the experience that keeps people in that closet and blocks them from living more authentically?
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge piece of it is fear. I think there is, depending on the context for any individual, there is absolutely a fear of physical repercussion. I think that that's part of it. But I also think there's the emotional repercussion. We are interpersonal beings, right? Like our interpersonal relationships are the most important part of our existence for so many ways. And when that is under a threat, real or perceived, we get into a mode of protecting it. And we will do anything, even self sabotage, to protect those relationships, to not change or threaten those relationships. So to me, that fear, again, for physical repercussions, but it's the emotional, social repercussions that change everything, right? Like, is that person not going to be friends with me? Am I going to get kicked out of my house? Are they going to judge me in whatever way? Like, we don't know, but we err on the side of safety to take care of ourselves and also to maintain those relationships.
That was absolutely my experience. I have been in a number of closets at different points in my life, including being in the closet from a sexuality perspective. I am bisexual and I was in the closet for the entirety of my life. And a lot of that was fear, not only of how people would judge me, but like fear that like I wasn't queer enough to come out, that like because I was in a relationship with a man, right, that people would judge me and like not think that I was authentic. And it kept me from owning parts of myself for many, many years. And being able to just speak my truth to the people that are important to me, it completely changed the way that I move through the world and how I feel in my own skin. It's like this unburdening. And it was the key for me, and I think for a lot of people, of like feeling stuck and then feeling free or unstuck.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's one of the things, like you even overlay coming out of the closet on the societal expectations of whatever label you are taking, right? Or is it enough? Like you just second guess yourself constantly. Like there's a piece of us that always says, like, who do you think you are to have like you don't matter enough to define yourself in any way. Like, why are you being so complicated? It's like all the things that we go through of like, if you could just fit, but none of us fit. That's not, there is no true fitting because we're all unique. So we need to broaden what we think fitting looks like, right? Like to me, that's just being yourself. My son this today was like, we were talking about how he was born with a ton of hair. And he's like, well, did that make me special? And I was like, buddy, everything about you makes you special. You're going to have a different experience in this world because of all of those things that make you special. And I think from what you're saying about speaking your truth is like not just how it's great, but also how it's hard, right? The speaking your truth and the challenges that lends to the authenticity of that voice that we all are complicated. And there isn't just one closet that we come out of. We're constantly trying to decide how we're going to land in the world again socially, and that there it is by definition us living authentically is by definition a threat to the status quo, and you just get to the point where you're kind of okay with that because you realize that the status quo is stuck for you.
And what's interesting, you talked about fitting, and I do think that this desire to fit in and be accepted is plays a really big role in people not sharing their full authentic selves. Because again, fear of judgment, fear of being shunned socially, fear of not fitting in. But it's kind of a catch 22 because when we hold on to parts of ourselves and keep them hidden, even if there's the perception of us fitting in, I mean, I can speak for myself because there wasn't this like full authentic expression. It didn't feel like I was fully fitting in because it was like, well, there are so many things you don't actually know about me. You have this idea of me and who I am and how I'm showing up. And that fits into your definition of what is appropriate or what is good or what you want in your life. But there are all of these things that like I have in my heart that you don't know. And so that creates like this distance and this barrier.
And when it's so emotional and so vulnerable, you got to be pretty sure you either have to be willing to take the hits, right, when there are those repercussions, or have enough trust in the person that you're sharing that with that they will treat that part of you gently. And that is a big ask when it's so much safer to just be in the closet where you can't get hurt, right? Where nobody can disappoint you. It takes a lot to get out there in that way because that threat is real. But for so many of us, I mean, I don't know your experience, but for so many times, I feel like the thinking about it and the worrying about it is always so much worse than the actual doing it.
Oh
Like,
my
I think
gosh.
that's the stuckness. Like, you get stuck in doing the mental calculation and the preparations, but like worrying about the thing is so much harder than actually doing the thing. That to me is where the stuckness lies.
Oh my God, talk about stuckness. I spent literal years of my life playing out these scenarios in my head of all of the different ways that these conversations could go. And even though I was like almost certain that people would be fine and would accept me, there was that like 0.2% that what if it goes this way? And the mental gymnastics and the energy that it took for literal years of my life. I mean, talk about stuck. And then when I did it, like when I told my
Hmm.
parents and when I told like my brother and when I told my friends and my husband, like it was just like, okay, great. Like, thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that with
next.
me. And it was like such a non issue that I'm like, I was stuck in this mental loop for years for no reason. Like it was my own brain playing these tricks on me. And the reality of the situation was so much easier and more loving and more compassionate than the scenarios that I was playing out in my head.
Yeah, it's so funny because I think when you do those calculations, like I don't know a lot of folks have gone through this process in whatever way of coming out of the closet. Like you figure out like what is the percentage of the time that it's going to go poorly, right? You're in that like 2% chance. it's inevitably less than that. And you trust these people and you love these people and you know that they love you. And is it is the way they see you going to change? Absolutely, because a fundamental part of you is different than what they previously thought. But they give them a little bit of credit. Like they can get around it. Sometimes they take a little bit of time, sometimes they don't, but like they'll get there if the love that you feel is true. And I mean, maybe they won't, there's a chance that they won't, but you are so much less free with that person in your life if that's the case. And like, give people a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And also, I think we're so worried about them judging us, but we try to control the dynamic that we're judging what their response is going to be. Right? Like it is, we're doing the same thing that we're asking people, that we're hoping people don't do for us, as opposed to just giving them the information and letting the chips fall where they may.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It was interesting. So when I was kind of going through it in my head and all of these fears of judgment and how is it going to go and am I ever going to come out? I'm married. Do I need to come out? Is that something? All of these, this kind of tornado in my head. I was watching Schitt's Creek, which Dan Levy, who's an absolute genius, he created a universe in where like homophobia or like sexuality being an issue was just not a thing. Everyone was just themselves and was accepted and loved and celebrated for who they are. And that touched me in such a deep way that I was like, oh, this is what it could be like. Like you could just be yourself and then everything is fine. And that is ultimately, like, it sounds a little funny, like a TV show
Yeah.
ultimately inspired me to come out. But that's what did it, was having an example of what it could look like where we just are who we are. And that's okay.
And the beauty of that show, I think, is that everyone was who they were. Like the straight old white guy was exactly who he was. Moira was exactly who she was. Like when you have a community or a group of people that can all be authentic, that's where the beauty happens, because everybody has weird, quirky parts of themselves. And your sexuality is kind of just a weird, quirky part as much as any of the other things. But when you can be that person who is that beacon of authenticity, it welcomes authenticity from other people. It empowers and allows people to be authentic, not just about their sexuality, but about all the parts of them. Because I am a complicated human, as all of us are, and I bring all of that to the table completely. And also, I think the beauty of that is you know exactly what you're going to get. Like when you have an authentic friend or an authentic person that you go to, you're not surprised a lot. You might not like I operate in a very intense way a lot of the time. I can like throttle that a lot of times, but sometimes I don't. And I don't surprise the people closest to me anymore. Right? Like they know I'm pretty much an open book. And that's not that all of these traits are good, right? But they are all of these traits that are me, and you exist in this world where I'm working on that. But I don't think I surprise anyone anymore. And to me, that is how we get to full authenticity, is like, you like it, don't like it, whatever. It is what it is.
Well, and because then you attract your people, right? Like the people that you have in your life are people that love you for you. Good, bad, challenging, funny, like all of the different characteristics. So, yeah, I agree. And also, can we just say, I wish that there were more Moiras in the world. Like, I wish I had a Moira in my life. There are so many different ways to go from stuck to unstuck. But one of the most productive, learning. Learning something new can help you expand your skill set and find new interest, and in the process, help you get unstuck. And if you want to learn something new, you will definitely want to check out Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes designed to help you learn, grow, and tap into your creativity, all of which can help you make the journey from stuck to unstuck. And right now, Skillshare is offering a free month to new members. If you want to access Skillshare's entire library of classes and get the education and instruction you need to shake off the stuckness, just visit seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare and sign up for your free trial today. Again, that's seasonofstuck.com/Skillshare. So, we've talked a lot about the experience of being in the closet and whatever that closet may be, and how that can make us feel stuck. From your perspective and your experience, why is coming out of the closet so important, especially as it relates to moving from feeling stuck to feeling unstuck?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly earlier. Like, what is metaphorically, what is more stuck than being in a dark space with four walls and a closed door, right? Like, that is the epitome of stuck. You're trapped. It's like you can call it whatever you want. That is it. And also, I think in the same way of like part of stuck is not having the ability to move, right? But it's also something's keeping you there. It's safer. Like it is a known, right? And I think coming out is an unknown and super scary and all the things that we had talked about previously. So I think it's that idea of like a object in motion stays in motion and object at rest stays at rest, right? Like if you're stuck and pent up and all of the things that that feels like, you don't even have to know what the experience of metaphorically being in a closet like. Think about walking in a closet and shutting the door and what that would feel like, and then what it would feel like to open it and walk out. Like that somatic feeling is exactly what that is. And that is the epitome of being unstuck, right? So I think that that's the importance is the motion, is the moving. It's doing something different than what you're doing, even if what you're currently doing feels safe. It's the movement that's the important. You don't even have to know where you're going, right? You just have to not do what you've always done, right? And that doesn't have to be blasting out on social media that you're like flying out of the closet, right? That's like saying it to yourself in the mirror, saying it to somebody that's close to you, and then sitting on it in a while, right? Like forward is a pace, I feel like, and moving in any way and changing the wave and getting your bearings again, feeling safe just with your toe out, right? Or just peeking out. Like you reestablish safety and then you become a little bit braver and a little bit braver. And that's how some people do it. Other people just like put it all out there at once and like let the chips fall where they may, right? I think that there's different strategies, but what all of those have in common is the unstuckness of movement.
I'm almost visualizing like a closet, and you're in the closet, and that's where you're stuck. And then you open the door and then slowly move out, and you're like moving out to the unstuckness. And you can turn back and look at the closet that was keeping you stuck and see that you're in a different place.
1,000%. And I also have this vision of like, you can want to do it. You can open the door, but there's still things like your feet are still almost like Velcro, right? It's harder than just stepping. There are things that are keeping you in there that you almost have forgotten are controlling you. Like you got to open the door to get the light in to even see what's keeping you in there, right? I think is part of it too, that there's this, it's not always as simple as you just walking out of the closet. It's all the baggage and all the things and all everything you've kind of built up in there that's coming out too.
That is a great point and a great segue to my next question, which is, to your point, coming out of the closet is not just throwing open the door and diving out. It's a process, and it can be a journey from feeling stuck in the closet and then being fully out and being able to reflect and see that you are no longer stuck. So I know this is like a broad question, but how do you do that? Like, how can we come out of the closet and be our truest, most authentic selves and get unstuck in the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is so individual, right? It's such an individualized journey. I think to me, at least, the most important thing is to feel safe, physically, emotionally, whatever. Like the hardest person I ever had to come out to is myself. It's like the in the mirror owning, like this is me. I disliked it for so long. I exhibited some external homophobia because I was scared of it, but you get to the point where you just like, if you can look in the mirror and say it and be okay with it, right? And know that that's you and It's just a different, more true version of you. There's no good, bad. It's just different, right? Like that's the first step to me. And like you need a little, you can, I guess if we stay in this like kind of imagery of a closet, like you can kind of turn your cell phone light on by yourself and do that, right? Like that's the first, you need light though. There has to be light. There has to be realization and honesty and hard conversation with yourself. And that kind of owning it, I think, is the first step to it. And then I think you need to have safety. The first people I came out to were not the people that it was the scariest to come out to. Those most threatened relationships were real. Those threats seemed real to me. So you create this kind of safe space where you can land if those conversations take the worst case scenario that we talked about, right? When it goes badly, and it might, you know you have a soft place to land. There are those people that are going to be okay with it. And I think such a huge piece of this whole conversation is to give people hopefully some insight into what that process is like to come out. But equally as important, I think, is what happens when you're one of the people that somebody comes out to. How do you catch that? Like one of the first people I told that I was gay was my sister. And we were both living with my parent. We were both home for the summer. And I came home to her and I just knew I had just had my heart like ripped out of my body in a breakup. I was hiding everything. I wasn't telling anybody anything. And I was like shattered. And I feel like it was a realization for me of like, all the heartbreak I had seen on TV, the heartbreak I had seen from friends, like heartbreak actually meant something to me and I needed to tell somebody. And so my sister was the first person I told. And I was like, we got to talk. We went down, we were like in the basement and all the things. And she was like, well, I figured you were either gay or pregnant. Like those were the things that she thought it could be because it was the weight of what was happening. She just knew me well enough to know it was significant. But she was like, immediately there for it. I know they were like she had to reframe some things and she had to like figure it out, but like in that moment, it wasn't about her. And like that's to me what allyship is. Like it's not about me. Like I'm here to figure it out. Do I have all the answers? No. Am I gonna have some questions later? Absolutely. But like right here, right now, what you need for is for me to be like, okay, I got it. We'll figure it out together, right? And so I think that that is such a huge piece of that is that we also have to be open and be willing and be the people. And the more authentic you are, the more people are going to tell you their stuff. I feel like when you are like living that life of being out there and being authentic, like authenticity welcomes authenticity, right? And so people feel like they can do that. I've had like so many weird random conversations where people connect with you because their secret, if you're a sharer of secrets, they want to share their secrets with you too. And so just be mindful of what you do when that happens, when you become a safe space. Because I think that's also what authenticity is, right? Is like you're a creator of safe space. Of like I'm going to be me, and by definition, that means you can be you too.
I love that idea that when we're thinking about closets and being stuck and authenticity, that it's not just our own closets that we need to come out of, but that we also need to make it safe for other people to come out of their closets and foster that authentic connection. And you're totally right. Like attracts like. I know for me that the people that I'm attracted to are like the people that I aspire to be like, which are people who are living their most authentic, true, like personalized lives. And there is a permission when you meet someone like that who is just being them, that it's like okay for me to be me. And we need to be mindful that we don't just need people like that to be ourselves. We need to be that person so other people can be themselves.
That's so well said. Absolutely. I think that's so key. And also to have that mindfulness of I am currently stuck or I was stuck or whatever your relationship is to stuck in any, but like the people around you, they're stuck too. Everybody's stuck, right? Like to have that kind of empathy of like you, and I learned this from my kiddo and the conversations that we've had of like, when there are reactions or interactions that are not what you would hope for, right? Like, can you lean into that curiosity and say, where are they stuck? Like this person has to be stuck somewhere. Where are they stuck and how can I help them get unstuck? Like how can I be that mirror or that soft place to land or that person who holds a boundary or like whatever, but like what is my role in relationship to them and helping them get unstuck wherever they're stuck, right? Like how can that be the conversation and the lens and the language that we use to help facilitate some of this like fluidity that we're looking for in what we know creates better humans, better communities, better relationships, better everything when we've had this experience of being stuck and then what unstuck feels like.
And that circles back to what you said at the beginning, which that breaks down that barrier between us and them. When we can recognize the universality or like the universalness of stuckness and
Yeah.
like I've been stuck, I know that you're stuck somewhere. That's something that we can connect on and then that helps to bring us closer.
Yeah. And it's just like the humanity. Like
Mhm.
it's human to be stuck. Of course it is. Like there is just a humanity in that. And like, and that's like the beauty of empathy to me is like, you don't have to agree with someone to find empathy. Like, you just have to be willing to know what it's like to be them. And like, that's not just because I'm around somebody different, it's not going to change my mind. But hopefully it changes my perspective. But like our willingness to engage can't be based on the fact that I'm afraid that I might think about something differently because I have this interaction. You think of like how politically divisive things are right now, but like those ends of the spectrum are so far out there, and we all the majority. If we are not a pundit, you pretty much exist in the middle. You know what I mean? That's where so many of us are in that huge bell curve scenario, and so I don't think that having a conversation with somebody who has a different political view of mine, like my views aren't threatened, but maybe it does change my perspective a little bit, right? There's this willingness to see people as not, again, just like you said, like not them, but just closer to us. And I also think it's important to address that, like authenticity in that way, people living their authentic life, authenticity and transparency are two totally different things, right? I don't have to tell you everything to tell you enough. I don't have to be that vulnerable to tell you enough for you to understand me just a little bit better.
Thank you for highlighting that. I went through a period where I thought being authentic meant that I had to tell everything to everyone, that I had to be an open book in all situations. And that is not an emotionally safe thing to do all the time. And recognizing that I don't owe anyone parts of my story and that I get to choose what I share and when I share it. And that doesn't mean that I'm any less authentic was like such an empowering and helpful lesson to learn.
Because I think that keeps us in the closet, right? Confusing those two, conflating transparency and authenticity. Like, well, of course I don't want to do that. Of course I don't want to be, I don't want to be that token. I don't want to have to be the politically correct police. I don't want to have to do that, live that every second of my life. Am I less authentic because I'm not 100% transparent 100% of the time? Absolutely not. Authenticity is the decision to be who you are in that moment. And authenticity, what's authentic changes. It is contextual, it is subjective, right? Like what is authentic in one given moment is maybe not authentic in a different given moment. So what is authentic to us evolves. It's a willingness to be in touch with that in any given moment and be okay with what authentic means right now for me. What does it mean to be authentic right now? And that could be completely different than what that means tomorrow or 10 years from now.
Absolutely. So, for someone listening who's listening to our conversation and seeing themselves in this kind of stuckness of being in a closet and not feeling able to be their most authentic self, share those parts of themselves with the people that they want to share it with. What advice would you give them on how to start that journey from feeling stuck and in the closet to moving forward and moving away from that stuckness, away from that closet towards more authenticity?
I think so often we get in our head worst case scenario, right? That what if the 2%? What if this? What if that? Like I would say balance that with your best case scenario. Like actually envision what your best case scenario would be and then come to terms with the fact that it's going to land somewhere in the middle, right? But it's we look at the only guardrail, and this is our worst case scenario, but we have to find that the middle of the road is going to be between our best and worst, right? And it's hard to get excited about what the best case scenario is, because then we're going to be disappointed. And I'm saying we need to know what our two edges are, and then we know we're going to land somewhere in the middle. And I think another bit of advice would be just kind of really diving into what we just talked about, the difference between authenticity and transparency, right? Like, what does it take for me to be authentic and still feel safe? That is no less authentic. What it takes for you to be safe is to only be 10% transparent, but it opens the door to coming out of the closet. Great, get there. We don't need to have these leaps and bounds. We just need everybody to be a little bit more authentic, a little bit more brave every day. And it builds on each other, because inevitably, as you and I both experienced, it isn't as bad as we think it's going to be, right? Like, will there be setbacks? Probably. But the trajectory is genuinely up and to the right, right? So, how do we figure out where's one small place in our lives where we can be just a little bit more authentic? See how it goes, and then build on that. And then that ceiling becomes our floor, and we incrementally kind of climb this authenticity ladder. And also, I think you also come to terms with knowing that you're not going to be 100% authentic 100% of the time. That's like these isn't like an end goal of like, I've achieved authenticity. It's more of having this relationship and awareness of what authenticity is, and then consciously making the decision of how I want to act relative to that.
I love that advice so much. I am literally going to write down be a little more authentic, be a little bit braver. And it's interesting. So, we had a guest on the show, Britt Frank, and she is an expert on stuckness and on creating lasting change. And her research shows that micro yeses. So it's not about the big, sweeping, huge steps. It's actually those small, teeny micro yeses, or micro choosing to be more authentic, micro choosing to be a little bit brave. That's actually what creates that forward momentum and that lasting change. So it is those small steps that are really going to lead you from stuck to unstuck.
Oh my God, micro yeses. I love that. I'm writing that down. Micro yeses are brilliant. And I think part of being authentic is not only what you say yes to, but also what you say no to, right? Like, where do you try to draw those lines? Where do you try to draw those boundaries? Like, that idea of the change happens in the small every day, because I think authenticity is something, it isn't something we do, it's who we are. And I think that's what we're striving to be. It is that it isn't this checklist. It's just the more we practice it, the more ingrained it becomes, and the more you feel stuckness when you are inauthentic. You're so dialed into what it feels like to be authentic that being any other way is just not possible, right? Like, that feels uncomfortable.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Ash, this conversation has been so incredible. I feel like I have learned so much, and also am like feeling so much compassion for myself and for other people who have experienced that stuckness, and feel like we've got so much good, juicy stuff for how to start making those changes. So thank you for that. Here at Season of Stuck, as we near the end of the interview, we have just a couple of questions that we love to ask. So if it's okay with you, I just have a few more questions for you.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. So, question one, thinking about your ideal future self, like the Ash that you are working every day to one day grow into. If she could travel back in time and talk to the current version of you, what advice do you think that she would give you on how to get unstuck at this stage of your life?
That's such an interesting question. For me, I think it would be have more self-compassion. I feel like when you're trying to get better, when you're working on these things, and like for me, patience is a big one, and like slowing down and all of those things that I'm not super patient. I think the greatest place that that happens is that I'm not patient with myself, that I do make those mistakes, that I am inauthentic, that I don't show up as the person that I want to be, and how that self judgment is just brutal and detrimental, that it makes me not want to be in this curious space. So I would say more self compassion would go a long way.
It sounds like future Deanna and future Ash are on the same page. That is my future advice for myself as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like so many times it just you feel like I'm part of the problem, right? It's like the Taylor Swift. It's like hi, I'm the problem, it's me. It's like I'm the reason I'm stuck. Like I get myself stuck so many ways if I can kind of get out of my own way and not bring that like why are you stuck? You shouldn't be stuck. You've been working on this. No, you're not doing it fast enough. Like that piece is that like Velcro on the shoes that we were talking about. It's like the unseen things that keep you where you are. So I'm glad that Future Ash and Fusion Dean are friends.
Yes, it sounds like our brains work very similarly. So the next few questions are rapid fire. So I'm just going to ask a question and you say the first thing that comes into your mind.
Got it.
Okay. Question number one. Favorite movie of all time?
The Sting, 1973.
Ooh, I've never seen it. Who's in that?
Robert Redford and Paul Newman.
Ooh, okay. So like classics.
Yes, classic, good movie.
Okay. Go to coffee order.
Oh, quad Americano, no room.
Okay. So is that like a black coffee?
Yes, like a black, like double or like four shots of espresso with some hot water. So I can't. The espresso straight is a little much for me, but
Mm-hmm.
fresh brewed cup of coffee is where it's at.
If you could have any animal in the world as a pet, what animal would it be?
Oh, monkey.
Ooh, that's a good one. I feel like that would be a very smart companion animal to have.
Right? Like as long as it doesn't like eat you, and if there's no threat of danger of it like going wild on you, I think a monkey would just be a blast.
Oh, completely. Because it could like do puzzles with you, it could interact with you in ways that other animals can't.
1,000%.
Okay. And last question. What is the best concert that you have ever been to?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good one. I will say probably I saw Billy Joel and Elton John together on a rooftop bar overlooking Wrigley Field in Chicago.
Oh my God, that sounds absolutely epic. And interestingly, Billy Joel is also my best concert of all time. So I was living in LA and I'm from New York originally. So Billy Joel is like an institution in my family. And we were at the Hollywood Bowl.
Hmm.
And when you go to the Hollywood Bowl, you can go early and kind of like picnic and hang out before the show. And I was with my cousin and we were in the nosebleeds. We were like 3 rows from the back. And someone from Billy's team came up to us and asked if we wanted to move up. And apparently, Billy Joel at every show fills the first few rows of his concert with fans. Like you can't buy those tickets, like they pull people from the crowd. And so we got to see him front and center at the Hollywood Bowl.
No way.
It ruined concerts for me forever because it was literally the first, like the 2 front row center seats for Billy Joel at the Bowl. And it was like, well, this is the pinnacle. It's never going to get better than this.
Oh my God, I never need to see live music again the rest of my life because this is it. I've
I
done,
know.
nothing is going to compare. That is amazing.
He is still so incredible. His vocals, like it was an absolutely mind blowing show.
Oh, so awesome.
Ash, thank you again for being here. This has been such an awesome conversation. I so appreciate your time and your insights. If listeners want to connect with you and learn more about your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So ashbeckham.com is my website. And then on social, it's at Ash Beckham on everything except Instagram is at the Ash Beckham. So yeah, I would love to connect and chat with anybody about this or anything else. I'm usually an open book. So it's fun. So thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ash. Really appreciate it. That's it for today. A huge thank you to our guest for their incredible insights, and a huge thank you to you, our listeners. We know that there are so many podcasts out there to choose from, and we are just so grateful that you chose ours. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider recommending the podcast to a friend or family member that you think would enjoy it. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcasts. And while you're there, if you loved the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It plays such a huge part in getting this podcast out to a wider audience and ultimately supporting more people on their journey from stuck to unstuck. And to keep in touch and access even more stuck-related content, follow us on Instagram at Season of Stuck and visit our website, seasonofstuck.com, where you can sign up to get episodes delivered directly to your inbox. Thank you again for being here. It is so, so appreciated. Until next time, I'm Deanna DeBera, and you're listening to Season of Stuck.